In late 2002, it was reported that a recently deceased man named Ray Wallace had started the whole Bigfoot legend by faking the first tracks cast in Northern California in the 1950s. Ray Wallace had never claimed this himself. His family even admitted he never claimed it himself, but they did have boxes of his old junk after he died, which included some carved wooden track stompers. When the Wallace family was contacted by a Seattle reporter after Ray passed away, at the behest of promoter Lauren Coleman, one of the Wallace nephews claimed that Ray not only researched the subject, but he had started the whole thing with a harmless prank using these wooden track stompers. The Seattle reporter saw an opportunity for a headline story, and thus the obituary about a longtime figure on the Bigfoot scene became the official media announcement that the father of Bigfoot had passed away. The venerable New York Times contributed to this deception when their Seattle-based reporter Egan was assigned to fluff the father of Bigfoot story into a New York Times cover story. Egan, possibly at the behest of NYT editors, blatantly and deliberately misquoted the three scientists he interviewed for the story: Dr. Henner Fehrenbach, Dr. Matthew Johnson, and Dr. Jeff Meldrum. Egan claimed all three of them credited Wallace with creating the first publicized trackcasts that gave rise to the legend. Fehrenbach and Johnson say, in their brief conversation with Egan, they made it very clear that Wallace didn't give rise to the legend, and they didn't know anything about Wallace's possible involvement with those first publicized trackcasts. Dr. Jeff Meldrum told Egan that he could prove that Wallace did not fake those first trackcasts. Egan challenged Meldrum on this point. Meldrum said the proof was readily apparent in the photos. The shape of the trackcast doesn't match the shape of the Wallace track stompers. Egan's cover story in the New York Times didn't mention the discrepancy plainly visible in the photos. Egan's challenge to Meldrum on the track shape issue suggests two things. 1. Not only was Egan well aware that Meldrum didn't give Wallace credit for hatching the legend. 2. It seems Egan, and possibly the NYT editor, had already decided what they wanted to say in this cover story. They only needed to attribute the right quotes to some experts to make it work. When those experts couldn't be coaxed into making those statements, Egan simply said they did. When the three experts later demanded a correction or retraction for Egan's distortions, the New York Times ignored them. 3 PhDs. This occurred when the Jason Blair scandal was already brewing at the New York Times, but before it was publicized, the Times was desirous to pin unethical practices solely on Blair, and not let it seem widespread among its reporters. Fehrenbach, Johnson and Meldrum still claim Egan blatantly and intentionally misquoted them. Other environmental reporters at other newspapers say Egan has done similar things before. Tim Egan has never been investigated about this, or at least the three misquoted experts have never been contacted by the Times to investigate the matter.